ونسلم على رسوله النبي الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Alhamdulillah, we have discussed the verses, the blessed verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, having completed the first and now the second ruku. And by Allah's blessing, we're now going to reflect on the verses in the third ruku. The third ruku begins with the ayah 21, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So this verse is now following a very heavy set of ayahs where we had been talking about the qualities of the disbelievers and the munafiqeen. And the state of the believer by now should be, oh Allah, protect us from those diseases. Oh Allah, protect us from infaq. Oh Allah, protect us from becoming a mufsid. Protect us from becoming a kadhib. All these words that were used in the Holy Quran, the kadhibeen, the mufsideen, and all of these negative words, Allah protect us from them. And one person asked me a question, and really that was a perfect question to ask at the time. The question was, you mentioned all these diseases, fi qulubihim maradun, and all of these diseases, when is the treatment going to be mentioned? And that really is a sign of iman, that the believer wants to know what is the remedy. In hospital, when you break bad news to somebody and say you've got something serious like a cancer or a bleed on the brain, at that point, that person is not interested in the anatomy of the brain or the physiology of cancer or anything. They want to know, how do we treat this? That becomes their primary focus. And so this ayah begins to answer and remedy that question. Ya ayyuhan nasu abudu rabbakumul ladhi. O people, worship your Lord who created you. Walladhi, alladhi khalaqakum, who created you. Now, it's such a beautiful way to answer. Having said all of these things, and having just left you in the middle of the desert, in Awqa Sayyib, in the heavy rainfall, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now changes to second person and directly addresses human beings. He does not say Kul. He does not say this through his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a direct commandment now to me and you. And it's not Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu as one would expect in a Madani surah, but it's Ya ayyuhan nas. All people. It's a message now to everybody. And nas is a special word used to describe human beings. Nas comes from, in its root word, just for brevity, I'm going to skip a few of the etymologies in the semantic field and come down to uns. Uns is a type of love. It's a type of deep love. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses. Normally when we hear these ayahs, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, Ya ayyuhan nas ubudu, we think it's like a pointy finger, oh go and do this. But actually the ayahs are filled with love. Even the Ya ayyuhan nas, Ya is the most respectful way to call somebody. Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam in the Holy Quran, when they address their father, it's, you know how like we in this culture, you know, may Allah protect us, some people call their dads even by their name. Like in our culture we don't really do that. Now we're even casual and say dad, or you know, it's very brief. Very few people will say dad G, very few people, and very few people will say, oh beloved father. Correct? Very few people will say that. But that was the Quranic way that Ismail alayhi salam addressed their father. Ya abati, oh my beloved father. In the same way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses his beloved people, Ya ayyuhan nas, oh my beloved mankind. And it's a very deep level of love in those phrases. U'budu, worship rabbakumul ladhi. This is the first time in Al-Baqarah Sharif that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces himself. And how many names does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have? 99. He could have chose any of them. Ya ayyuhan nasu ubudu, worship Allah, worship Ar-Rahman, worship Ar-Rahim, like was used in Al-Fatiha. But the word used was Rabb. This is the crux of the matter. understanding your relationship with Allah through this ayah. Most people think the relationship between man and God is of Khaliq and Khaliq the creator and we the creation. That's what we often think. But the deep relationship is that of Rabb and Abd. Abd is slave and Rabb is the master. When you can accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Rabb, Rabb is a true master. The owner of a servant, the owner of a slave, does not owe anything to the slave. Anything given is a bonus. It's an additional goodwill. The servant does not have volition and free will, if you look at the technical aspects. So this is the word used, Rabb, that we accept everything you ordain for us, that you give to us. And once you accept that, then the rest of the Quran is going to flow through your veins, flow through your heart. And if there was fi qulubihim marad, if there was a disease in the heart, the Quran and the nur of the Quran will wash that away. So long as you recognize that He is your Rabb and you are His Abd. In modern day terms, the word slave has very negative connotations. You know, we have whole things dedicated to erasing that history that we had, you know, whether it's black slavery, whether it's statues that were to do with slavery. Even up until the last few months, statues were being destroyed in this country that had connotations to do with slavery. But the relationship between Allah and His servant, Rabb and Abd, is one of love. That's not seen in mankind. It's not based on love. What master says to his servant, do what you like, and I'll still give you food, I'll still give you water, I'll still give you air and oxygen. You do one thing wrong and the master's all over and he's going to punish you. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this free will to mankind. خَلَقَكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And worship me like those who worshipped before you, so that you may become mindful of Him. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Why was min qablikum mentioned? Why were the people before us mentioned? Because Islam is here not to, this world, social media, etc., makes you feel like you're just some random thing floating around, and you were born, you're in a hospital, you work, you die, khalas, finished, that's the end of it. The Quran gives you dignity and says that you are part of a tradition from Adam alayhi salam. We honored you. We honored you at every phase. Remember the people before you. It makes you part of a social fabric, and you are continuing that important role of transmitting the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the subsequent generations. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to inculcate this ayah in our hearts. May He allow us to understand the love with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls all people, not just Ya ayyuhal muslimun. And may He allow us, when we interact with others, believers, non-believers, Muslims, non-Muslims, atheists, polytheists, agnostics, to also have that love in our speech as well. And may He make us aware of His rabubiyyat and of our abd, of our servantness. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be part of that great fabric in which we will also transmit the great deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to our children. Inshallah, we will continue tomorrow. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.